And as you know, Australia is getting bigger by the day, and I don't just mean around our waists, myself included, but of course we are a growing population. Currently 27.3 million people. At the last census, it was 25 million. 10 years before that, it was 21 million. 10 years before that, it was 18 million. And for those that were around in 1991, myself included, heading off to high school I was in that particular year, you can see that the country has grown by 11 million people in the best part of 30 years. That is 11 million more mouths to feed, people to find housing for, infrastructure. But because it's a couple of 100,000 here and a couple of 100,000 there, but when you actually look at that huge increase in our population, in a period of time that most people watching this show certainly were living and certainly in the prime of their life for, from 1991 to 2025, 16.8 to 27.3 million. And Australia is set to grow. Because, of course, businesses want more customers, the federal government wants more people to be in the country, so they end up becoming more taxpayers, which means we get to a scenario where potentially, depending on how much immigration, whether it is at low, medium or high levels, will be anywhere in 2071 between 34 million people. 1991, 16 million people, or 45 million people, almost 46 million people. Well, what, of course, makes the Ponzi scheme of endless population growth, and if it doesn't happen naturally, then you import more people to the queue, is that everyone gets older. Everyone at some point in time gets sicker and everyone needs to be taken care of. And if there are 5 million people who need a hospital now, it'll eventually become 7 and then 10 and then 15. And to pay for it, you need to make sure that there's 7, 10 or 15 million people of full working age who are not going to need things like the healthcare system. So today, I was very interested to see some numbers come out from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and it talks about just how many Australians have got a chronic illness right now. 1 in 15, 6% of adults have diabetes. 1 in 7 adults have indicators of chronic kidney disease. That's currently 14%. It was 10% 10 years ago. So more people are now having indicators of chronic kidney disease. 30% of people have abnormally high cholesterol levels. Guilty. 1 in 5, or 20% of adults, have a vitamin D deficiency. This is slightly down from where we were 10 years ago, but you get my point. Now, we think about more population as being exclusively something about roads or rail or places to live. But of course, at some point in time, really little people need to go to school. People of a particular age need to go into some sort of care. There's a whole bunch of compromises in the middle, but the more people you add to the queue, the bigger all of these problems become. And a frightening example of what I have talked about for years, and I don't care what any election result tells us for the next 100 years, I stand by this point, which is currently we don't have enough money to pay for everything that is demanded of the federal, state and local governments. In fact, this chart I've shown you how many times is how many budget deficits there will be between now and 2063. There is not one surplus into a realistic future. This government went into an election promising not just $1.2 trillion worth of debt, but no budget surpluses for the next 10 years. But when you start to look at a population that goes from the 1990s at 16 million to the 2070s at 45 million, you've got to build a lot of stuff. That's a lot of houses, a lot of homes, a lot of units, a lot of schools, a lot of disability care centres. A lot more than just a rebadging of your local medical centre as an urgent care clinic. A lot more hospitals, even a lot more graveyards. The reality is that this is where the rubber hits the road in a conversation about population. One thing that was despicable about the federal election just gone was that any conversation about the number of people that you add to the queue was somehow a racist attack on people who have come to the country through legitimate and legal processes over the past 2, 5, 10, 15 years. It's real low-rent politics, but the reality is whether you were lucky enough to be born here decades ago or you're somebody that will join the greatest club in the world, Australia, in the next 10 years, the more people, the more need for infrastructure. The more need for infrastructure, the higher the spending of federal, state and local government. And as that graphic shows you, there is not enough money for that infrastructure. So you would think someone somewhere wants to tap the brakes, not because anyone's being racist, doesn't like the person and the look of them on the other side of the street or the languages that they speak at home. That's all rubbish. It's because we know that the country, that even all of its troubles in 2025 will be considered the golden years in 25 years' time, when our population surges past 30 and starts to make its way towards 40 million people. It really matters whether a government can balance the books or not. Because right now, after all of the ups and downs of this country in its modern form, it's $1.2 trillion debt. Every single one of those bars that shows a deficit is added on top, on top, on top. 1.2 becomes 1.5, becomes 1.7, becomes 2, becomes 2.5. And as I've shown you before, in places like Victoria, where they have this idea that in order to pump prime the politics, you just keep making the spending promises, the electorate then starts demanding the promises, and whether you have the capacity to pay it or not doesn't matter. And it goes from servicing the debt of all of the money of all of the taxpayers, goes from something in the top 20 of the spending priorities to the top 15, to the top 10, to, in the case of Victoria, of all of the things, education, transport, all the rest of it, in the top 5 of things that need to be serviced when it comes to debt in the future years, is the $10 billion needs to be paid off debt as interest. That will be the case in the federal budget, regardless of whom is the Treasurer in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And I stand by that this is a rich melting pot with lots of people from lots of places, and that makes us a better country. But the idea of how big the pot can possibly be with how many people in it is going to create its own troubles. And there's nothing wrong with talking about it, because I will keep showing you the evidence that as it shows today, we get older, we get sicker, more need for public investment, but the credit card is already maxed out and they're already borrowing $1.2 trillion from the rest of the world.